Hello, this is Jerry Mitchell, and we are back for another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Director of ICE says they don't need probable cause to detain people based on their physical appearance, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosspost from the law subreddit. And yeah, it looks like a clip of Fox News of the Director of ICE, I guess, saying that. And yeah, personally, I think they probably do need probable cause to detain people, but, ultimately, as I've said in many of my previous episodes at this point, the government has the legal monopoly on lethal force, so they can get away with pretty much whatever they feel like, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. I personally don't care for it, but that's just the hard reality of the situation. Then we have Secretary of Homeland Security says the U.S. government will prosecute those who identify ICE agents from OregonLive.com, posted by CH4Lux, and yeah, I personally don't really care for that either, but as I said, ultimately the government can do whatever it wants to most of the times, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm sure if it was your branch of the Uniparty in power, you'd be completely supportive of it, but since it's the wrong branch of the Uniparty, they think it's the worst thing ever. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Rosie's a Loser, an Iowa reporter, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the Boomers Being Fools subreddit, and that's Donald Trump posting on Truth Social. Because of the fact that Rosie O'Donnell was not in the best interest of our great country, I'm giving serious consideration to taking away her citizenship. She is a threat to humanity and should remain in the wonderful country of Ireland. If they want her, God bless America. And yeah, personally I think that's just Trump trying to shitpost and rile everyone up. And of course, all the Redditors are taking the bait, even though he's been doing stuff like this for pretty much his whole political career. And even before that, he always had that big feud of Rosie O'Donnell. But Reddit, they always fall for the bait every time. And personally, I think he's just kind of joking around here. But of course, on Reddit, it's everything he does is fascism. Every breath he takes is fascism. And eventually, that's why no one really cares when you call him a fascist anymore. It's like the boy who cried wolf. It's the Redditor who cried fascist. Eventually when no one really cares when you say it all the time, it should be a word used for rare occasions, just like not Nazi as well. But Reddit, they always just say, oh, fascist, Nazi. Everyone who dissents at all is a fascist or a Nazi. In some ways I would agree with Trump being a fascist, but Reddit is completely fine with fascism when it's blue fascism, like with Obama or Biden, and that just goes to show you, they don't have any values, only teams. As I said, that's another thing I usually say in these podcasts. Then we have, next they want to revoke your citizenship for insulting the Fuhrer, posted by CH4Lux, and that's cross-post from the Blue Sky Seats subreddit, and it was a tweet from Ed Krasenstein, who quote tweeted the truth I mentioned earlier. Breaking: Donald Trump just said he's considering stripping U.S.-born citizen Rosie O'Donnell for citizenship. This is what leaders like Hitler would try to do. Imagine if Biden said he was going to strip Trump of his citizenship. Imagine the outrage by MAGA. This is dangerous. And yeah, of course, Reddit's always going to be like, this is the worst thing ever. And of course, Reddit's called Trump's Hitler so many times at this point, it's barely even warrants glance anymore. It's like that scene from SpongeBob. You're Squidward, I'm Squidward. He's Squidward, you're Squidward, I'm Squidward. It's that only like with Hitler. He's Hitler, I'm Hitler, you're Hitler. But Reddit, when you call everyone who dissents at all Hitler, eventually no one's gonna care when you throw the word Hitler out there. And yeah, if you want to call Donald Trump Hitler, that's fine. But when you've called him Hitler so many times, just like you called him a Nazi, a fascist, etc., etc. No one's going to care anymore when you do so. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, are there any organizations on Long Island, from Dav.com, and that's a cross-post from the Market Anarchism subreddit. And they said, been looking to be active in the movement, but I haven't been able to find any organizations of anarchist volunteers related to objectives. And yeah, personally I don't live on Long Island, but I think there probably might be any organizations out there. I don't really know. But you can find, personally, thanks to the internet, you can pretty much find any community you want. And yeah, that's why I think in a lot of ways, IRL groups are suffering because of that, because everything's just online these days. But that's something that, that's only tangentially related, I guess. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have the Army and Navy want the right to repair their own equipment from taskandpurpose.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I think that sounds good. I think everyone should have a right to repair their equipment however they feel like. And yeah, I think the libertarian position is, you should be able to repair your equipment however you feel like. But with that being said, that you shouldn't be forcing the manufacturer or the person or the store that sold it to you to repair it if they don't feel like it, and that's why I would argue right to repair really isn't a right. It's more of a privilege when it comes to repair. It's like John Locke says, you have the right to your own labor, but you don't have the right to the labor of others. And I feel like that's a lot of what they mean when they say right to repair. They mean the forcing the manufacturer or the store that gave it to you to repair it rather than, repairing it yourself. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have new poll delivers troubling signs for Democrats from thehill.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added the Democratic Party's credibility of voters has plummeted even further since the 2024 election, raising alarm bells as the party looks to rebuild ahead of the midterms and the next presidential election, according to a poll obtained by The Hill. The poll conducted between May and June by Unite the Country, a Democratic super PAC, showed voters believe the Democratic Party is out of touch, woke, and weak. And yeah, personally, a lot of people aren't too big on MAGA right now after the whole Epstein stuff and a lot of and Trump bombing Iran. But just because people aren't big on MAGA, it's important to remember that the Democrats, they pretty much have nothing other than we're not MAGA at this point, and that's why the party seems to be almost in full collapse. Just because voters don't like one side doesn't mean they're automatically going to like the other side, and that's what the Democrats need to realize. Otherwise, the party is just going to collapse. And, personally, I think they'll probably find a way to work it out, but I personally think it's time for just the party to go after 200 plus years. Same with the Republican Party, even that's been only around like 170 years or so. But ultimately, I think it's time for new parties in there. I personally wouldn't care for a socialist or a progressive party, but if I was a Democrat who was a socialist or a progressive, I would be trying to create my own socialist or progressive party, just like Elon's trying to do with the America Party over in regards to the Republicans. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have, I give you to the actual President of the United States, posted by Donald Key, and that looks like a truth that Donald Trump made. We're going off my boys, and in some cases gals, they're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's doing a fantastic job. We're on our one team MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with the Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, quote-unquote intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more. They created the Epstein files just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton / Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, and now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. files. No matter how much success we have at securing our border, reporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons, it's never enough for some people. We are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years, and we have so much more to do. We are saving our country and making America great again, which we will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Castro and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals, instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired Democrats on documents of Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 2024. That's what she's looking into as AG, and it's much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And yeah, my thoughts on that are, ultimately, I think Trump, he loves to attack the Democrats as radical left lunatics, but they're really the two branches of the same uniparty. And Trump himself was a Democrat as recently as 2009. He's probably in the Epstein files, just like Bill Clinton is. It shouldn't be a partisan thing. It just goes to show you that, that it's like WWE. They're always fighting in the ring, but once they get outside the ring, they're suddenly the best of friends hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. And that just goes to show you how, you gotta question who's really running the government. I've heard that Epstein might have been a member of Mossad, Israel's CIA, and that's something that people say it's the Republicans and Democrats running the government. Because the government was in reality, I would say Israel's running government a lot more than they are. The Israeli government is running the U.S. government a lot more than they are, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have disabled veteran who is a U.S. citizen was taken during Camarillo immigration raid, family says, from ABC7.com, posted by Legio X. And yeah, that's not something I personally care for, but as I said, the government can justify doing whatever it feels like doing since it has a monopoly on the use of force. The veteran himself would have had that monopoly back when he was a veteran, or back when he was enlisted, and that's important to remember as well. He could have very well been the boot of the state if back when he was in the armed forces as well, and that's important also to remember, I would say. Then we have I will do anything for love, states' rights, but I won't do that, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the centrist subreddit, and that looks like a tweet from the New Report or something, I don't know. With a stroke of a pen, Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe signed off on legislation repealing the paid sick leave provision of ballot measure that roughly 58% of Missourians voted was approved in November. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that. I don't think workers should be forced to do paid sick leave. Companies should be forced to do paid sick leave if they don't want to, even if they the people say so. That's why democracy is tyranny of the majority. That just because 58% of the population votes for something doesn't make it right. And yeah, I personally would agree with Kehoe here. I guess Reddit would say, but my democracy, and that's, as I said, democracy is just tyranny of the majority. What the libertarian position is, every individual should be able to justify whatever they feel like as long as they're not hurting anyone else. So you shouldn't be forcing private companies to give paid sick leave if they don't feel like it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have one thing I love about Trump presidency is I get to recycle my 5-year-old memes because they're all relevant again, posted by CalDog Curmudgeon, and that's a meme of the Joker running, and it says, me running out of PetSmart teaching all the parrots to say Epstein did not kill himself. And yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like the past decade has just been on repeat kind of ever since like 2015, 2016. It's kind of been the same orange man bad, woke bad, all that. And yeah, personally, it gets tiresome after a while, but you do get to recycle a lot of old content, I guess you could say. That's a benefit of it. Then we have regulations keep us safe from greedy companies, posted by Ragnarok KXG, and that looks like a post from Dr. Ellie Murray. And she posted, some of y'all forget the reason we have food safety regulations is because companies used to do things like adding chocolate spoiled milk so it looked normal. Regulations don't exist because governments enjoy them. They exist because pure unadulterated capitalism would kill us. And I guess I could see an argument for both sides here. Ultimately, I think private companies should be able to justify whatever they want to feel like without government regulations. But that being said, they might do some unethical things if those regulations aren't in place. But ultimately, they'll justify regardless, I would say, if the regulations are in place or not. So I think the libertarian position is no regulations. Justify doing whatever you want to. If you need a regulation or a law for it to be moral, then you're not going to be moral in the first place, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Bernie Sanders reveals the AI doomsday scenario that worries top experts from Gizmodo.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I think the AI stuff is overhyped. I do think, I think it's a lot like a gun. You can misuse it, but ultimately, I think, if you want to use it however you feel like, that's okay, but, I definitely do think it's kind of overhyped. It's not going to lead to the collapse of society, I don't think, unless it becomes self-aware, like a Skynet scenario happens, which I guess that could happen, but I definitely do think it's kind of overhyped at the moment, that, people are saying it's going to kill all our jobs and then take over, but, ultimately, I think, people need to think for themselves rather than having AI think for them, and that's my big problem I have. If people let AI think for them rather than actually try thinking for themselves. And I think the libertarian position is you got to think for yourself rather than have outside influencers try and think for you. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.